The medical bay of the Unity's Edge had never been so busy. Alien doctors moved between beds where wounded soldiers from 6 different species were being treated. The air hummed with the sounds of advanced medical equipment and the quiet conversations of those lucky enough to survive. In one corner, Jiho sat on an examination table while Daiho worked on his injuries. The human medic's hands moved with practiced efficiency, cleaning and bandaging wounds that should have been fatal hours ago. 17 separate injuries, Daiho muttered as he worked, including 3 that should have put you in shock. How are you still conscious? Practice, Jiho replied simply. Thakmor limped over on a regenerated leg, his massive frame supported by a walking aid designed for Vrek's physiology. His gray-green skin was pale and his movements careful, but he was alive, thanks to Daiho's field medicine, when the high-tech healing systems had failed. Human, he said, his deep voice unusually quiet. Jiho looked up. Commander, I owe you an apology, and my life. You don't owe me anything. Thakmor shook his head slowly. I mocked your stories, called them myths, fairy tales for a weak species, trying to pretend they were strong. Maybe they are myths, Jiho said as Daiho finished bandaging a particularly deep cut. Does it matter? Matter? Thakmor's eyes widened. You single-handedly defeated 30 enemies to save 4,000 civilians. How can you ask if it matters? Jiho stood up carefully, testing his balance. Because the story isn't about whether it actually happened, it's about what it means. Kliktha approached, her movements stiff from injuries sustained in the tunnels. Her natural armor showed scorch marks and dents, but she was healing. Explain. Other alien soldiers began gathering around, drawn by curiosity and something deeper. Respect, perhaps. Or the need to understand what they had witnessed. Jiho looked at the faces watching him. Vrex, Zephyrian, Cathari, and others. All species that had considered themselves superior to humans just days ago. Every human child grows up hearing stories, he began. Stories about people who refused to give up when giving up made sense. David fighting Goliath with a sling and a stone. 300 Spartans holding a mountain pass against impossible odds. A Marine sergeant who held his position for 3 days with a broken back because his men were counting on him. Vextar's skin shifted to curious yellow. But those are just stories, entertainment. Are they? Asked Sujin, who had been quietly listening from nearby. Or are they instructions? The aliens looked confused, so she continued. Think about it. Every human knows these stories. We hear them as children, study them in school, watch them in movies. They're not just entertainment, they're lessons about what humans can do when we decide something is worth dying for. Hyunwoo joined the group, favoring his left arm where shrapnel had found gaps in his armor. The stories aren't myths, he said. They're aspirations. They tell us what we could become if we tried hard enough. But the biological impossibilities, protested Grixnall, the logical alien who prided himself on facts. Pain tolerance beyond normal parameters, endurance that defies metabolic limits, strength that exceeds muscular capacity. Minho laughed, a sound like gravel in a tumbler. You're thinking about it wrong. Those aren't biological advantages. They're psychological ones. Explain, demanded Thakmor. Wanbin set down his rifle, which he had been cleaning with religious devotion. When I was lining up those impossible shots, I wasn't using superhuman vision. I was using 40 years of practice and the absolute certainty that if I missed, innocent people would die. When I was treating wounded under fire, added Daiho, I wasn't ignoring pain because I can't feel it. I was ignoring it because people were depending on me. Yunji nodded. When I was crawling through those maintenance shafts to reach the power systems, I wasn't smaller than the blueprint said was possible. I was more determined than physics said was reasonable. Understanding began to dawn on some of the alien faces. Your species, said Kliktha slowly, doesn't have superior biology. You have superior psychology. Not superior, corrected Jiho. Just different. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years. The humans who survived were the ones who refused to accept that they were beaten. Commander Zalkith, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped forward. So when you tell stories about impossible victories, you're not exaggerating past events, you're preparing for future ones. Every human story about someone refusing to surrender teaches the next generation that surrender is a choice, not an inevitability, said Yuna. Every tale about someone fighting through impossible pain shows us that pain is just information, not a command. Thakmor sat down heavily on a reinforced chair, his massive frame suddenly looking smaller. We thought you were weak because you needed stories to make yourselves feel strong. And we are weak, admitted Hyunwoo. Individually, any one of you could tear any one of us apart, but we learned something you didn't. What? That being weak doesn't mean being helpless. That being outmatched doesn't mean being defeated. That being afraid doesn't mean being cowardly. The medical bay fell quiet, except for the hum of equipment and the soft sounds of healing. Outside the viewports, Kepler 438b turned slowly in space. Its mining colony now safe because 8 humans had refused to accept the mathematics of defeat. Vextar's skin cycled through several colors before settling on a deep, thoughtful blue. Your stories aren't about humans being superhuman. They're about humans being more human than seems possible. Now you're getting it, said Jiho. A young Cathari medical assistant, barely old enough to serve, raised one of his 4 hands tentatively. But how do you teach this? How do you make someone refuse to surrender when surrendering makes sense? The humans looked at each other, and several of them smiled. You tell them stories, said Sujin. You tell them about the time 8 human soldiers saved 4,000 civilians from 300 pirates. You tell them about the sniper who made impossible shots, the medic who treated enemies under fire, the demolition expert who turned a colony into a weapon against its captors. You tell them about the old soldier who walked into certain death because children were in danger, added Hyunwoo, looking at Jiho with obvious respect, and how he walked back out again. Those aren't myths, Jiho said quietly. Those are instructions. For the next time someone needs to do something impossible. As the Unity's Edge jumped to hyperspace, carrying its mixed crew toward their next assignment, the alien soldiers found themselves seeing their human companions in a completely different light. The myths they had mocked weren't exaggerations at all. If anything, they were understatements. They failed to capture the most important truth about humanity. When everything was on the line, when innocent lives hung in the balance, when the mathematics of warfare said defeat was inevitable, that's when humans stopped being merely human and became something far more dangerous. They became heroes. Not because they were born superior, but because they chose to be. And that choice, passed down through stories and songs and legends for thousands of years, had turned an entire species into something unprecedented in galactic history, a race that had weaponized hope itself. 3 weeks later, when the Unity's Edge received another distress call, this time from a research station under attack by hegemony raiders, the alien commanders didn't hesitate. "Get me the humans," Commander Zalkith ordered. It was becoming a standard phrase throughout the galactic fleet. After all, when you needed someone to do the impossible, you called the species that had spent 10,000 years practicing for exactly that moment. The species that had turned impossible into just another word for Tuesday. The species that had learned to fight wars with legends as weapons, and who won those wars by refusing to believe they could lose. The main processing chamber of the colony stretched out like a metal cathedral, its ceiling lost in shadows 30 meters above. Industrial equipment created a maze of walkways, conveyor belts, and processing stations. In the center, 4,000 terrified civilians huddled together under the watchful eyes of Grakthul and his elite guard. The Draknari commander stood on a raised platform, his scarred face twisted in a mixture of rage and grudging respect. Around him, 30 of his best warriors kept their weapons trained on the hostages below. "Clever little humans," he called out, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You've caused me considerable trouble." Hyunwoo's voice came back over the facility's communication system, clear and steady. "Let the civilians go and we'll make this easy on you." Grakthul's laughter was like breaking glass. "Easy? You're 8 soldiers against 30 of my elite guard, in a position of my choosing with hostages as my shield. What could possibly be easy about that?" Jiho crouched in the ventilation system above the main chamber, studying the tactical situation, through a maintenance grate. The setup was perfect for the defenders. Elevated positions, clear fields of fire, and human shields to prevent any direct assault. It was, by any measure of military doctrine, an impossible situation. "Status report," Hyunwoo whispered over their short-range radio. 30 hostiles, Jiho replied. "Elevated positions, excellent sight lines. They've got the high ground and human shields." "Recommendations?" Jiho was quiet for a moment, studying. The chamber with the eyes of someone who had spent decades learning how to turn impossible situations into possible ones. "I go in alone." The radio crackled with immediate protest from his teammates. "Absolutely not," said Hyunwoo. 8 against 30 is bad odds. 1 against 30 is suicide." "Not if it's the right one," Jiho replied. Aboard the Unity's Edge, the alien commanders listened to this exchange with mounting horror. "They can't be serious," said Vextar, his skin shifting through worried colors. 1 soldier against 30 entrenched enemies? Commander Zalkith activated his communicator. "Human squad, this is command. Do not attempt single-soldier assault." "Repeat, do not attempt single-soldier assault." Jiho's voice came back calm as still water. "Command, with respect, this is what we do." "What you do? This is madness." "No, sir. This is Tuesday." The transmission cut off. In the processing chamber, Grekthul had grown tired of waiting. He grabbed a human child from the crowd of hostages and held a blade to the boy's throat. "Attention, humans," he roared. "You have 1 minute to surrender or I start killing civilians, starting with this one." The child, maybe 8 years old, looked up at the towering Dreknari with tears in his eyes but didn't make a sound. That's when the lights went out. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting the chamber in dim red shadows. In those shadows, something moved. The first Dreknari guard died silently, his weapon taken from his hands before he even knew he was under attack. The second managed a brief cry of alarm before a knife found his throat. Grekthul spun around, searching the gloom for his attacker. Find him, kill him. But Jiho had become something beyond a simple soldier. In the red-tinged darkness, he moved like a ghost of every human warrior who had ever refused to surrender. When surrender was the smart choice, he was the Marine who held the line at Chosin. He was the soldier who charged the machine gun nest, because someone had to. He was the pilot who flew the damaged bomber home because his crew was counting on him. He was every human who had ever looked at impossible odds and said, "So what?" A guard on the upper walkway died with Jiho's knife between his ribs. Another fell to a captured Dreknari weapon turned against its former owners. A third simply disappeared into the shadows, his scream cut short. "Where is he?" Grekthul demanded, his voice cracking with something that might have been fear. The answer came from everywhere and nowhere. Tools became weapons. Machinery became cover. The industrial environment that the Dreknari had thought would trap their enemy became Jiho's ally. One of the guards spotted movement and opened fire. His energy blast lit up the chamber for a moment, revealing nothing but empty air. By the time his vision cleared, 3 more of his companions were down. "Impossible," whispered one of the surviving pirates. "No one moves that fast." But Jiho wasn't moving fast. He was moving smart. Every step calculated, every action planned 3 moves ahead, every breath controlled and purposeful. This was what 40 years of military experience looked like when it was unleashed without restraint. The hostages watched in amazement as their guards fell one by one to an enemy they could barely see. Children stopped crying. Adults who had given up hope began to believe again. 1 human, 1 soldier, 1 man who had decided that surrender was not an option. Grekthul found himself alone on the platform with only 5 guards left. The human child was still in his grasp, but his confidence was cracking. "Show yourself," he roared into the shadows. "Face me like a warrior." Jiho's voice came from the darkness, calm and infinitely patient. "I am facing you. You just can't see it yet." 2 more guards vanished into the shadows, then another. Now it was just Grekthul and 1 terrified subordinate, holding 4,000 hostages in a chamber that had become a hunter's domain. What are you? Grakthul whispered. Jiho stepped into the light, and for the first time, the Draknari commander could see his enemy clearly. Blood seeped through tears in the human's simple uniform. His face was pale from blood loss, and he moved with the careful control of someone fighting through serious injury. He looked like he should have collapsed an hour ago. Instead, he looked like death walking upright. I'm a human soldier, Jiho said simply. And you're holding children. The last guard raised his weapon, but Jiho was already moving. The guard's shot went wide as a thrown knife took him in the chest. Now it was just Grakthul and the child. Stay back, the Draknari leader snarled, pressing his blade closer to the boy's throat. I'll kill him. Jiho stopped, his hands raised but his eyes never leaving the pirate's face. Yes, he said quietly. You will. And then I'll kill you. And then I'll explain to that boy's parents why I let their son die. Grakthul blinked. You'd sacrifice him to get to me? No, Jiho replied. I'd live with sacrificing him to save 4,000 others. But I don't have to. Why not? Jiho's smile was cold as winter. Because you made one mistake. What mistake? You assumed I came here to negotiate. The throwing knife took Grakthul in the wrist, making him drop his blade. Before he could recover, Jiho was there, pulling the child to safety and putting the Draknari commander on the ground with efficient brutality. It was over. 4,000 civilians were free. 30 elite Draknari warriors were dead or unconscious. The colony was secure. One human soldier stood among the hostages, swaying slightly from blood loss, but still upright, still ready to fight if necessary. The myths the aliens had laughed at weren't myths at all. They were just history written by people who didn't understand what humans were capable of when everything was on the line. As medics rushed to treat the wounded and transport teams began evacuating the civilians, the alien commanders finally understood what they had been dealing with all along. Not a species that told exaggerated stories about their heroes, a species that had weaponized the refusal to surrender and turned impossible odds into just another day at the office. The first Draknari patrol died without knowing what hit them. Wanbin's rifle spoke once from a concealed position 300 meters away, and the patrol leader collapsed. Before the others could react, the humans had melted back into the shadows of the colony's industrial maze. Contact Sector 7, the surviving Draknari radioed to their command. Sniper fire from unknown position, but by the time reinforcements arrived, there was nothing to find except empty corridors and the lingering scent of gunpowder. Aboard the Unity's Edge, Sujin monitored the tactical feeds with growing amazement. The humans had been on the ground for only 20 minutes, but their vital signs showed something impossible. Their heart rates were steady, their stress hormones were elevated but controlled, and their performance was actually improving under pressure.
How are they doing that? She whispered to herself. Commander Zalkith overheard. Doing what? Their biological readings. According to our sensors, they should be exhausted by now. Instead, they're getting more efficient. On the ground, Hyunwoo
led his team through the colony using tactics that would have horrified alien military instructors. They moved like ghosts, using maintenance tunnels and service corridors that didn't appear on official maps. When they encountered resistance, they didn't attack head-on. Instead, they used the environment itself as a weapon. Yoonji had found the colony's power distribution center. Give me 5 minutes, she told Hyunwoo, and I can turn their own lights against them. Do it. While Yoonji worked, Daeho moved through the battlefield treating wounded aliens. He crawled through hostile territory, ignoring enemy fire, to reach injured Vrex and Zephyrian soldiers who had given up hope of rescue. Why are you here? Asked a wounded Cathari pilot whose ship had been shot down. Your commanders said humans would stay safe. Daeho bandaged the alien's wounds with steady hands. We don't abandon people who need help. Even us? After how we treated you? Especially then. The lights went out across an entire section of the colony as Yoonji finished her work. In the sudden darkness, the humans' advantages became clear. They had trained for night fighting since childhood, playing games in the dark, learning to move by sound and feel. The Draknari, who relied on their natural night vision, suddenly found themselves facing an enemy who seemed to see in the dark better than they did. Minho appeared behind a group of pirates like a shadow-given form. His knife work was silent and efficient, learned from masters who had perfected the art when humans still fought with steel and determination. Yuna's simple radio cut through the electronic jamming that had silenced alien communications. Suddenly, the scattered alien forces could coordinate again, guided by human voices that seemed to know exactly where the enemy was and how to avoid their traps. But it was Jiho who truly began to embody the legends the aliens had mocked. A squad of Zephyrian soldiers was pinned down in a maintenance bay, surrounded by Draknari who were moving in for the kill. Thakmor's voice came over the radio, weak but desperate. "Any unit, we need immediate assistance at grid reference 77 Alpha. We have wounded and no way out." "On our way," Jiho replied calmly. What happened next became part of galactic military history. Jiho entered the maintenance bay through a ventilation shaft that military doctrine said was too small for effective troop movement. He emerged behind the Draknari positions like an avenging spirit, his simple weapons doing terrible, efficient work. The pirates turned to face this new threat, and in that moment of distraction, the trapped aliens broke free. But Jiho didn't retreat to safety. Instead, he advanced. One human against 15 Draknari pirates. By every measure of military science, it should have been suicide. The pirates were stronger, faster, and armed with advanced weapons. But Jiho fought like his ancestors, had fought when humans were just another prey species trying to survive on a hostile world. He used the maintenance equipment as cover and weapons. He turned the pirates' own aggressiveness against them, making them stumble into each other in their eagerness to kill him. When his rifle ran empty, he switched to a sidearm. When that was gone, he picked up a Draknari weapon and used it against its former owner. When even that failed, he fought with tools in his bare hands. The Zephyrian soldiers watched in stunned silence as this ordinary-looking human somehow survived encounters that should have been mathematically impossible. "How?" Kliktha whispered over the radio. "How is he still fighting?" The answer came from Yuna, whose voice was steady despite the chaos around her. "Because he's human, and humans don't know when to quit." The pattern repeated across the colony. Wherever alien soldiers were in trouble, humans appeared as if from nowhere. They didn't fight like the aliens expected soldiers to fight. They fought like predators who had learned to hunt other predators. Wanbin eliminated enemy snipers from impossible angles, using iron sights and instincts honed by generations of hunters. Yunji turned the colony's own industrial equipment into weapons, collapsing tunnels to trap enemies and opening new passages to outflank them. Deho moved through the battlefield like death couldn't touch him, treating wounded from both sides while enemy fire sparked off the walls around him. The tide of battle began to turn, but the cost was becoming apparent. The humans were taking damage that would have stopped other species. Jiho was bleeding from multiple wounds but still fighting. Minho had taken a blast that cracked 2 ribs but hadn't slowed down. "Medical assessment," Commander Zalkith requested, over the radio. Deho's voice came back steady and professional. "Multiple casualties, human and alien. But we're still operational." "Define operational." "We're still moving, still fighting, still completing the mission." Aboard the Unity's Edge, alien medical officers studied the human vital signs with disbelief. Pain levels that should have caused unconsciousness, injury patterns that should have meant instant medical evacuation, stress hormones that should have triggered system shutdown. But the humans kept fighting. "It's impossible," muttered the ship's doctor, a Cathari whose forearms moved frantically over his instruments. "Their bodies should have shut down hours ago." Sujin looked at the readings and finally understood what Jiho had meant about myths existing for a reason. "They're not just fighting with their bodies," she said quietly. "They're fighting with something else." "What?" "Their refusal to accept that they can lose." On the surface, the remaining Draknari were beginning to understand that they faced something they had never encountered before. These humans didn't follow the rules of warfare that governed other species. They didn't retreat when retreat was logical. They didn't surrender when surrender was smart. They just kept coming. Grakthul, the Draknari commander, snarled into his communicator. What are these creatures? They fight like they're already dead. His lieutenant's reply was shaken. Commander, they've retaken the power station, the communications hub, and the transport depot. They're cutting us off from each other. How many of them are there? Intelligence says 8. 8? 8 soldiers are doing this? The lieutenant checked his tactical display again, hoping he had made a mistake. Yes, Commander. 8 humans. Grakthul's expression shifted from anger to something approaching respect. In Draknari culture, only the strongest survived, and strength was measured by the ability to overcome impossible odds. These humans, it seemed, had mastered that art. Bring all our forces back to the main complex, he ordered. If they want to die so badly, we'll give them the chance. But as his forces consolidated, Grakthul couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't preparing to crush 8 desperate soldiers. He was preparing to face 8 forces of nature that happened to look human. The first sign something was wrong came 30 seconds after the alien assault began. Thakmor's voice crackled over the radio with confusion instead of confidence. Command, my targeting system just went dark. All electronics are down. From the Unity's edge, Commander Zalkith watched his perfect battle plan collapse in real time. The tactical display showed his assault teams as scattered red dots, their signals weak and intermittent. EMP bursts detected across the colony, reported the ship's tactical officer. The pirates were waiting. Kliktha's squad had landed in what should have been an empty cargo bay. Instead, they found themselves in a carefully prepared kill zone. Hidden weapons opened fire from concealed positions, and what had seemed like abandoned shipping containers suddenly revealed themselves as armored fighting positions. Taking heavy fire. Kliktha's transmission was broken up by static. Armor is holding, but we're pinned down. They knew exactly where we were landing. Vextar's flight of 6 fighters screamed through the atmosphere, their pilots confident in their superior reflexes. But the Draknari had studied alien tactics too. Surface-to-air missiles launched from unexpected angles, using the planet's magnetic field to confuse targeting systems. Fighter 3 is down. Vexitar's voice was tight with shock. Fighter 6 is badly damaged. How are they hitting us so accurately? In the colony's winding tunnels, Thakmor's shock troops found themselves facing an enemy that refused to fight fair. The Draknari had collapsed ceiling sections to create choke points, then filled those choke points with traps and ambush positions. The Vrek soldiers' superior strength meant nothing when they couldn't reach their enemies. These tunnels are death traps, Thakmor growled into his radio. Every corner we turn, they're waiting. My powered armor is useless in these narrow spaces. The alien assault planned with mathematical precision was falling apart. Their advanced technology was failing. Their superior physical abilities were being neutralized, and their enemies seemed to know their every move before they made it. Aboard the Unity's edge, the human team listened to the disaster unfold. Told you so doesn't really help right now, muttered Minho as another report of alien casualties came in. Hyunwoo was studying the real-time intelligence feeds. The Draknari aren't just defending, they're herding our people into specific areas. Kill zones, said Jiho grimly. They're turning the whole colony into one giant trap. Sujin looked pale as she monitored communications. We're losing contact with most of the alien squads. The jamming is getting worse. Commander Zalkith's voice came over the command frequency, and for the first time it carried a note of desperation. All human units, prepare for emergency deployment. Hyunwoo activated his transmitter. Command, this is Human Squad Alpha. We're ready to assist. There was a long pause. Then, Squad Leader Kim, our primary assault has encountered unexpected resistance. We need immediate support. Another pause. Then Vextar's voice, strained and proud. We require assistance, Likel. Humans looked at each other. In all their time serving with the alien forces, none of them had ever heard those words before. Jiho stood up and began stripping off his advanced equipment. Off came the powered armor components, the energy weapons, the high-tech sensors. In their place. He picked up simple projectile weapons, basic armor, and minimal electronics. "What are you doing?" asked Yunji. "Fighting like my grandfather did," Jiho replied, checking an old-fashioned rifle, with tools that work when everything else fails. The other humans understood immediately. They began switching out their equipment for simpler, more reliable alternatives. Energy weapons went back into storage, replaced by projectile firearms that couldn't be jammed by EMP. Powered armor was swapped for basic protective gear that didn't need batteries. Yuna packed away her sophisticated communication equipment and pulled out a simple radio that used analog signals. If their jamming is electronic, this should cut through it. Wanbin loaded his sniper rifle with basic ammunition and slung it across his back. Iron sights never run out of power. Daeho filled his medic bag with traditional supplies, bandages, antiseptics, pain medication that didn't require fancy applicators. If their healing tech is down, they'll need this. Commander Zalkith's voice came over the intercom again. "Human units, you are cleared for immediate deployment. Drop coordinates are being transmitted now." As they moved toward the drop pods, Sujin caught Jiho's arm. "The aliens think we've lost our minds, don't they?" Jiho's expression was grim but determined. Right now, the aliens are learning the difference between fighting wars in training simulations and fighting wars against enemies who want to kill them. And us? We learned that difference a long time ago. The drop pod bay was chaos. Wounded, alien soldiers were being brought back up from the surface, their advanced equipment sparking and damaged. Medical teams rushed between the casualties, trying to help species whose biology they barely understood. Thakmor was among the wounded, his massive form supported by 2 Cathari medics. His powered armor was cracked and smoking, and green blood seeped through the gaps. "Human," he called out as Jiho passed. His voice was weak, but still carried its rumbling authority. "You were right. The myths, the stories." "What about them?" Jiho asked. "Are they true?" Jiho paused at the entrance to his drop pod. "Guess we're about to find out." The drop pods launched toward the colony surface like falling stars. Inside his pod, Jiho felt the familiar calm that came before combat. Around him, his teammates prepared themselves with the quiet efficiency of experienced soldiers. Hyunwoo checked his weapons one final time. "Remember, the aliens expect us to follow standard tactics, but standard tactics just got a lot of them killed." "So what do we do?" asked Yunji. "We do what humans have always done," said Jiho. "We adapt." The pods hit the surface hard, their simple mechanical systems functioning perfectly despite the electromagnetic interference that had crippled the aliens' advanced technology. As the humans emerged into the chaos of the colony, they found a battlefield unlike anything their alien allies had been prepared for. The Draknari had turned the entire facility into a maze of traps, ambush points, and kill zones. But unlike the aliens, humans had been fighting in mazes for thousands of years. "Spread out," ordered Hyunwoo. "Use the terrain. Make them come to us." As they moved deeper into the colony, the humans could hear the sounds of alien soldiers in distress. Calls for help echoed through the tunnels, mixed with the harsh laughter of Draknari pirates who thought they had already won. "How many civilians are we talking about?" asked Minho as they navigated through a collapsed section of tunnel. 4,000, replied Sujin, consulting her basic tactical display. "And how many of us?" 8. Wanbin laughed softly. "Well, that's only 500 each. Should be easy." The joke was dark, but it served its purpose. The team's tension eased slightly. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and walking into a trap that had already defeated a superior alien force. But they were human, and humans had been beating impossible odds for as long as anyone could remember. "Remember," said Jiho as they approached the main colony complex. "The aliens thought those stories were myths. Let's show them what humans are really capable of." The briefing room hummed with tension as Commander Zalkith, a tall Cathari with golden skin, stood before the tactical display. The hologram showed Kepler 438b spinning slowly, its surface dotted with mining installations and processing facilities. The Kyo situation is critical, the commander began, his forearms moving as he highlighted different areas on the display. 300 Draknari pirates have overwhelmed the colony's defenses. They're holding approximately 4,000 civilians hostage in the main processing center. Thakmor crossed his massive arms. Draknari are fierce but primitive. This should be straightforward. The pirates are led by Grekthul, Commander Zalkith continued. Intelligence suggests he's more cunning than most of his kind. The colony sent this message before communications were cut. A crackling audio recording filled the room. Screams, mixed with weapon fire and a desperate human voice. They knew we were coming. They were ready for us. It's a trap. It's a... Static. The room fell silent. Even the alien soldiers looked uncomfortable. Vextar's skin shifted to a thoughtful blue. If they were prepared, they might have defensive positions. All the more reason to strike fast and hard, said Kliktha, her mandibles clicking with anticipation. Vrek strength, Zephyrian armor, and Cathari speed will overwhelm them before they can react. Yunwoo Kim, the human squad leader, stepped forward. He was a compact man in his 30s with intelligent eyes and the bearing of someone used to making life or death decisions. Sir, my team has experience in hostage rescue operations. We've studied Draknari tactics extensively. Thakmor's rumbling laugh filled the room. Studied? We don't need to study, we simply crush them. With respect, Hyunwoo continued, the Draknari specialize in turning advantages against their enemies. If we go in with conventional tactics work because they're effective, interrupted Vextar, his skin flashing annoyed orange. Your species tends to overcomplicate simple problems. Commander Zalkith raised a hand for silence. What do you propose, Squad Leader Kim? A smaller insertion team using stealth and precise strikes. Hit their command structure first, then extract the hostages in small groups. The Draknari expect overwhelming force. They'll be prepared for it. The alien commanders exchanged looks that clearly said they thought this was typical human overcautiousness. Negative, said Commander Zalkith. We have superior firepower and numbers. Squadron Leader Thakmor will lead the primary assault with Vrek's shock troops. Captain Kliktha's Zephyrians will provide heavy support. Commander Vextar's pilots will secure air superiority. And the humans? asked Hyunwoo. Thakmor's grin showed teeth like broken rocks. Perimeter security and medical support. Stay out of the way while real warriors handle the fighting. Jiho had been standing quietly at the back of the room, but now he spoke up. What if your plan fails? The question hung in the air like a challenge. The alien commanders turned to look at him with expressions ranging from annoyed to amused. Our plan won't fail, said Kliktha. We have every advantage. So did the colony security forces, Jiho replied calmly. Vextar's skin rippled with dismissive purple. Colony security isn't trained military, we are. Trained in what? Jiho asked. Fighting enemies who follow the same tactical doctrines you learned? Using equipment that works the way it's supposed to? Fighting fair? Are you suggesting we're incompetent human? Thakmor's voice carried a dangerous edge. I'm suggesting that the Draknari didn't become feared across 3 sectors by being stupid. Jiho's voice remained level. They've survived this long by being unpredictable. Commander Zalkith checked his chronometer. We drop in 6 hours. All units, prepare. For insertion, the plan is final. As the room began to empty, Sujin fell into step beside Jiho. You really think their plan will fail? I think the Draknari have had 3 days to prepare for exactly the kind of assault they're planning. Minho Choi, another human veteran with graying temples and steady hands, joined them. What are you thinking, Jiho? I'm thinking we better be ready for when things go wrong. 2 hours later, the human team gathered in their quarters to review equipment and plans. Unlike the aliens, who were checking their powered armor and energy weapons with obvious confidence, the humans seemed subdued. Wanbin, the team sniper, was methodically cleaning an old-fashioned projectile rifle. Energy weapons are great until someone hits you with an EMP, he said quietly. Daeho Song, their medic, was packing traditional medical supplies alongside the high-tech healing devices. Aliens heal differently than humans. If their fancy equipment fails, they'll need basic field medicine. Yunji Nam, demolitions expert, looked up from her gear. Think they'll listen if we try to warn them? Would you have listened at their age? Asked Minho. Yunwoo was studying schematics of the colony on a portable display. The mining tunnels are narrow and twisting, perfect for ambushes. If the Draknari funnel them into those passages, it'll be a slaughter, finished Jiho. The room fell quiet. Outside they could hear alien soldiers moving through the corridors with heavy, confident steps. Unico, their communications specialist, looked up from her equipment. I've been monitoring Draknari frequencies. They're using some kind of jamming system I've never seen before. Our standard comms might not work. Might not work or will not work, asked Yunwoo. In those tunnels? Probably will not work. More bad news. Jiho stood up and walked to the porthole, looking out at the approaching planet. How long until we reach the colony? 4 hours, said Hyunwoo. And how long until the alien assault begins? 30 minutes after arrival. Jiho nodded slowly. Then we better prepare for the worst. Which is? Asked Sujin, who had been quietly listening. The old veteran turned back to face the room. The worst is that those myths everyone was laughing about are about to stop being myths. In the alien quarters, the mood was completely different. Takmor was testing the servos in his powered armor, each movement producing a satisfied hum of machinery. His weapon could punch through 3 feet of solid rock. Kliktha was reviewing targeting data with her squad. Their natural armor was being enhanced with energy shields, making them nearly invulnerable to small arms fire. Vextar's pilots were running flight simulations, their reflexes allowing them to process information and react faster than any human could manage. They all felt ready. More than ready, they felt invincible. None of them noticed that the humans had stopped preparing fancy equipment and started preparing simpler things. None of them saw Jiho cleaning an ancient combat knife with the care of someone who had used it before. None of them paid attention when the human team began discussing hand signals and basic field procedures. The aliens were preparing to fight the war they expected. The humans were preparing to fight the war they feared was coming. As the Unity's Edge entered orbit around Kepler 438b. Both groups felt ready. Only one of them was right. The mess hall of the starship Unity's Edge buzzed with the usual evening chatter. Soldiers from different worlds sat at metal tables, eating their rations and sharing stories. But in one corner, the mood was different. A group of alien warriors had gathered around a holographic display, and their laughter was getting louder by the minute. Thakmor, a massive Vrex with gray-green skin and muscles like tree trunks, pointed at the floating images with one thick finger. His kind stood 8 feet tall and could bend steel with their bare hands. Look at this nonsense, he rumbled, his voice deep as thunder. These humans think one of their soldiers can fight 100 enemies and win. The hologram showed scenes from human military history mixed with clips from old movies. Ancient warriors with swords, modern soldiers in jungle combat, and action heroes doing impossible things on screen. To the aliens watching, it all looked the same. Pure fantasy. Kliktha clicked her mandibles together in what passed for laughter among her people. The Zephyrian looked like a giant mantis that had learned to walk upright. Her natural armor could stop most bullets, and her reflexes were faster than human eyes could follow. And this Rambo creature, she said, her voice like wind through broken glass. One human against hundreds. My larvae could create better fiction. Other aliens joined the group. Vextar, a Cathari with 4 arms and skin that changed color with his emotions, pulled up more human war stories. His people could see in the dark and had reaction times that made them natural pilots. Here's another one, he said, his skin shifting to a mocking purple. A human soldier holds off an entire enemy division while wounded. Completely impossible. Jiho Park sat at a small table 20 feet away, quietly eating his meal. The Korean-American veteran was in his 40s, with graying hair and scars on his hands that spoke of old battles. He wore the same uniform as everyone else, but something about the way he sat, alert, ready, marked him as different. He listened to the alien's laughter and said nothing. The biological facts are clear, announced Grixnall, a tall, thin alien, whose people prided themselves on logic. Humans are physically inferior in every measurable way, weaker than Vrex, slower than Cathari, less durable than Zephyrians. Yet their entertainment shows them defeating superior opponents through sheer will. Obvious compensation for their inadequacies. The group erupted in laughter again. Several human soldiers at nearby tables looked uncomfortable, but most tried to ignore the mockery. They were used to it by now. Sujin Lee, a young communications officer, shifted nervously at her table. She had joined the Galactic Defense Corps straight from college, full of dreams about unity between species. The reality was proving more complicated. She glanced at Jiho, wondering if he would say something, but the veteran just kept eating. "My favorite," said Kliktha, "is this story about humans never leaving their wounded behind. No man left behind, they say. Tactically insane. A logical species would sacrifice the few to save the many. Or this one," added Thakmor, pulling up another file. "Human soldiers fighting for days without sleep, ignoring injuries that would stop other species. Pure myth-making. Biology doesn't allow such things." Vexitar's skin rippled with amused orange. "They tell stories about their greatest generation stopping a world war through determination alone, as if superior firepower and industrial capacity had nothing to do with it." The mockery continued as more aliens gathered around. They shared their favorite, ridiculous human war stories, treating them like children's fairy tales. A human sergeant who held a position alone for 3 days. Marines who fought their way out of impossible odds. Pilots who flew damaged aircraft home through sheer stubbornness. "The funniest part," said Grixnall, "is that they actually believe these stories. Human military academies teach them as history, not fiction. They've confused their entertainment with reality." Young Sujin had heard enough. Her face red with embarrassment and anger, she started to stand up. But a quiet voice stopped her. "Sometimes," Jiho said, without looking up from his meal, "the myths exist for a reason." The alien laughter faded as they turned to look at him. The old soldier's voice had been soft, but something in it made them pay attention. Thakmor flexed his massive shoulders. "You believe these fairy tales, human?" Jiho finally looked up. His eyes were calm but hard, like stones worn smooth by water. "I believe in what I've seen." "And what have you seen?" Kliktha asked, her mandibles clicking with amusement. "Enough." Jiho stood up, picking up his tray. He moved with the careful balance of someone whose body remembered violence. "You'll figure it out eventually." "Figure what out?" Vextar's skin shifted to curious yellow, but Jiho was already walking away, his boots making no sound on the metal floor. The aliens watched him go, then burst into fresh laughter. "Mysterious human wisdom," mocked Grixnall. "How primitive." Mockery session broke up shortly after, but the aliens' confidence had grown. Tomorrow they would start joint training exercises with the human contingent. It would be a perfect chance to prove their superiority in practical terms. Later that evening, Sujin found Jiho in the observation deck looking out at the stars. The older man stood with his hands behind his back, perfectly still. "Thank you for not making it worse back there," she said quietly. Jiho didn't turn around. "Making what worse?" "The situation. When they were laughing at us. At our history." "Were they wrong?" Jiho asked. Sujin blinked. "What do you mean? Are those stories true? Can one human really fight 100 enemies and win? Can we really ignore wounds that would stop other species? Do we really refuse to leave our people behind, even when it's tactically stupid?" The young officer thought about it. "Some of them must be exaggerated." "Must they?" Jiho finally turned to face her. "Or are they just hard to believe?" Before Sujin could answer, an alarm sounded throughout the ship. Emergency lights began flashing red, and the captain's voice came over the intercom. "All personnel, to battle stations. We have received a distress call from Kepler 438b. Draknari pirates have attacked the mining colony. Repeat, all personnel to battle stations." The corridor filled with running feet as soldiers rushed to their positions. Sujin watched Jiho's face change as he heard the announcement. The tired old man disappeared, replaced by something harder and more dangerous. "What are Draknari pirates like?" Sujin asked as they hurried toward the briefing room. "Violent, smart, ruthless." Jiho's voice was flat, professional. "They don't take prisoners, and they don't fight fair." "Can we stop them?" Jiho was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Depends on whether those myths the aliens were laughing about are true or not." In the briefing room, alien commanders were already studying tactical displays and making plans. They looked confident, even excited. Here was a chance to show their superiority in actual combat conditions. Thakmor caught sight of Jiho entering and rumbled with laughter. "Perfect timing, human. You can watch real warriors in action." But Jiho wasn't looking at the Virex commander. His attention was focused on the tactical display showing Kepler 438b. His experienced eyes took in the terrain, the colony layout, and the estimated enemy numbers. When he was done analyzing, his expression was grim. The aliens might be physically superior, but they had no idea what they were walking into, and neither did they understand what humans became when innocent people were in danger. The myths they had been mocking were about to become very real.